Hello again, and welcome back to Educator.com's Advanced PHP with MySQL course. In today's lesson, we're going to be continuing development of our web application, incorporating what we learned in our last lesson on delete queries. So today's lesson is going to cover a new version of the web application called 17.0. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be updating our administrative interface so that we can delete both items and departments from the store, as well as add and remove items to and from different departments, particularly removing items from the departments. To do this, we're going to be these three new scripts that we're going to be making, which are going to be called delete department, delete item, and remove item from department. Correspondingly, they're going to have corresponding methods that we're going to be creating in database access that's going to make use of delete queries. So we're going to have a delete department method that's going to delete a department of the database, delete a department from the database. We're going to have a delete item method that's going to delete an item from the database, and then we're going to have remove item from department, which is going to allow us to basically just, as the name implies, remove an item from a department. So these first two delete operations are actually going to require that two delete queries be run. One delete query, for example, for the departments, delete departments function, we're actually going to have to run a delete statement on the departments table, and that's because we know that our department information about a department is contained in two tables. It's contained in the departments table and then also in our linking table. So it's going to have one query that's going to delete information from departments. It's also going to have a second query to delete any associations between items in that particular department. Because if we delete a department, it doesn't make sense that we would have items still associated with a non-existent department. Likewise, when we are trying to delete an item, we're going to be deleting a row from our items table. And at the same time, we're also going to be needing to delete rows from this department's items linking table. And the reason for that is that item that we're deleting might be in a particular department, and it doesn't make sense to have an item that's no longer existent associated with a department. So both of those are actually going to run two separate delete queries, and we're going to look at the code for that. Remove item from department, on the other hand, is just going to have one query. Removing an item from a department, the way that we do that is simply we delete a row from our linking table that links an item ID and a department ID. So it's just going to run a delete query on our departments _ items table. So let's take a look at our new database access class and the updates that we've made. So in version 17.0, we've got three new methods: delete department, delete item, and remove the item from the department. If you look at our delete department method, basically it depicts a department ID of the department we want to delete from the database. And the first thing it does is it runs a delete query to delete any associations that any items associated with that department in our departments _ items linking table. So as you can see, we have a delete query here created that says delete all the rows from our linking table that have the department ID equal to department ID passed in. So for example, actually, let me reset the database. If we actually look at our the contents of our linking table with our default database set up, we can see, for example, that for department 1, it has two rows in this table, one linking item 1001 to the department and one linking item 1004 to the department. So in order to delete all those associations, we would run this delete query here, and that would basically get rid of both of those rows, because what's going to happen is this where clause is going to match both of those rows in that table, because it says basically delete any rows in that table where department ID equals that. So it's going to delete both of those. So that's how we delete the associations for a particular department. We go ahead and we run that query, and then we have a statement that's going to output, we've deleted X number of rows from the items from that department. Then the second part of our delete process is we actually have to delete the item from the departments table, because that contains the name and department ID of our particular item. So we have a second query called delete departments from departments where department ID equals department ID passed in. And again, it's the same thing. It's going to locate that one row, in this case the one row in the departments table, because department ID is a primary key of our departments table, and it's going to delete that from the database. We run the query, check to make sure that one row was affected, meaning that that one department row was deleted, return true if it was, and return false otherwise. Basically the same thing happens with our delete item method. We pass an item ID to the method of the item we want to delete from our database. We go ahead and the first thing we do is delete any associations between that item and a particular department, because once we delete an item we don't want to have it linked to departments, because then when you load a department up, a department page is going to try to load an item that doesn't exist. So we run the same query as before, except this time we specify delete all the rows where item ID equals the item ID specified. So if an item is only in one department, where a particular item is in one department, then it's only going to delete one row. But maybe as our store grows, we might have an item spread over multiple departments, then it might delete more than one row. We simply have a log statement that's going to output the number of rows that were deleted from that table. And then we go ahead and, just as we had run a delete query on our departments table, to get rid of a department, we run a delete query on the items table, and we're saying delete the row and items that's associated with the item ID that's passed into this function. Because that's a primary key ID, it's going to uniquely identify that row and be able to delete it. We test to make sure that it was successfully deleted, that one row was deleted, and return true. Otherwise, we return false and output or log an error message. Oops. So the other method that we've added that's going to make use of delete queries is remove item from department. Basically what that does is it takes an item ID and a department ID, and it is going to use those two to run a delete query on our linking table that's going to delete that pair if it exists in the table. And what that essentially does is that effectively deletes that item from the department, because that's how the two are linked together. So we have some simple error checking that it does. It just checks to see if the item ID and the department ID are valid before it even tries to delete their association. It checks if the item is already in the department. If it's already in the department, we don't need to add a row to it, so it'll return true if the item's already in the department. And if not, the item's not in the department, both the item and the department exist, then it's going to run a delete query. In this case, it only needs to run one delete query because it's just deleting a association in our linking table. So it's going to delete a row from department items, and it's going to say delete the row where the department ID matches the one we've provided to the method, and the item ID matches the one we provided to the method. Because our department ID and item ID columns together in our linking table provide a primary key for that table, if that combination exists, this is going to delete one row in the table. So we test to see if one row was affected, one row was deleted, and then return true if it was, and false otherwise. So let's actually take a look at how this looks in how these function in our web application. Basically, in our admin site, we've updated it. We've created 3 new scripts: a delete item script, a delete department script, and a remove item from department script. And let's look first at remove item from department. So for example, it basically has 2 drop-down boxes, one to select an item and one to select a department, and you can select to remove an item from a particular department. And if we just run this query again to see, these are all the associations we have in our department items table. We have item 1001 and 1004 within department number 1. And if we actually go look at our regular side of the store, the non-admin site, and we look at Apartment 1, which is apparel, we can see that it has 2 items in it, 1001 and 1004, which is a t-shirt and a winter jacket. So if we want to remove one of those from the store, let's say we want to remove the winter jacket from the apparel department, we just click on remove department. It's going to let us know that it was successfully deleted. We'll notice 2 things. One, when we refresh our departments page, that is no longer going to show up. And then also if we look at our department's items linking table, we can see that that row linking item 1004 with department number 1 was deleted. So we can see that the remove item from department operation has 1 delete query, and it operates on the linking table. Now if we want to delete a department, for example, we simply select the department we want to delete, and it's going to do two things. It's going to need to run two delete queries, as we saw. It's going to need to delete any links to items in the linking table, and then also delete its row in the departments table. So for example, here we have department 2. It has two items in it, 1002 and 1004. It also has a row in our departments table that has the name, that gives it the name electronics. So when we go to delete this department, we're going to delete this row in the departments table, and then we also want to delete both of these rows in the linking table that link the items to that department. And that's what's going to happen when we run the script. So for example, if we delete the electronics department, department number 2, it's going to let us know the department was deleted. Now when we actually refresh our page, we can see it disappears from the left-hand nav bar because that loads all the departments from the database. If we run our select query on departments, again we can see that it's been removed from the departments table. And we can also see on the linking table that these two rows up here that had items in the department have been deleted from the table. So you're not going to run into problems where items are linked to departments that don't exist. Finally, we have just to show you the delete item script works the same way. For example, if we wanted to delete our DVD player, let's see, DVD player is item 1005. Actually, let's pick one that hasn't been removed. Baseball bat 1003. We can see that currently in our linking table it has one row. It's linked to the department number 3, which is sporting goods. And we can see that sporting goods is department number 3. We can also see the contents of our items table for this particular item. I'm just going to pull up the name and price. We can see that the baseball bat exists in the store. It has item 1003. Go ahead and delete the item. Two delete queries are going to get run. First of all, when we go to sporting goods, it's not going to appear anymore. If we run a select query on our items table, it doesn't appear in there. And then also this link that we had to department 3 in our linking table is no longer going to exist. And we can see that that link has been removed as well. So basically when we delete a department or delete an item, we have two queries that are being delete queries that are operating, one on the departments table or the items table respectively, and then one on the linking table that links items to departments. So one quick thing I wanted to mention is a concept known as transactions, a database transaction. And basically what it is, it's a way to link multiple queries together as if they were to be executed as a single unit. So for example, in our delete department function, or delete department method, we run two delete queries. The first query deletes the rows from our department's items linking table, and the second query deletes a row from the departments table. Now what happens if we were to run the first query and so we deleted all of the items for the particular department, and then something happened where the second query failed. We weren't able to delete the department from the database. Well, essentially we want to treat deleting a department as the combination of both of those queries. We want both of those queries to exist so that the database stays consistent. It's known as consistency. Stays consistent. So that if we are deleting a department, not only are we deleting all of the rows in the linking table for that department, but we're also deleting the rows from the department table. Right now we're running two separate queries in order to do that, and something could happen where one might succeed and the other might fail. Well, the concept of a transaction is to basically treat both of those queries as a particular unit. So typically what happens is it's a SQL thing. You signify the start of a transaction. We're not going to get into the details of it, but you'd say, I'm starting a transaction now. You'd run the two queries that you want to run as part of the transaction. So we'd run our two delete statements. Assuming both of those queries are successful, then you do what's known as a commit. And you basically commit the results and say, everything's fine, I want both of these queries to stay. Let's say, however, that we run the first query, but the second query causes an error. We don't want the database to be in that inconsistent state where there's items linked to a department, or there's a department exists, but it doesn't have its items in it anymore. So in order to do that, what you can do is a rollback. And basically what that does is that rollbacks any queries, or it basically resets any queries that were run since the start of the transaction. So if the first delete query was successful, the second delete query failed, you could test for that, and then what you'd say is, I don't want this transaction to occur, I want to roll it back, and it'll get rid of, it'll basically restore the database to the state it was in before the transaction started, meaning it'll basically erase that delete query that you ran. It's not something that we're going to be implementing in our web application here. It's a little bit more of an advanced topic, but I did want to mention it because it is important when you're running queries that that use multiple tables. If you have to run multiple queries, for example, to perform what you'd basically want to be a single operation, you can use the concept of transactions. MySQL has support for it, PHP has support for it, and it's a little bit more of an advanced topic, but we're not going to get into it, but I will include in the quick notes a link to some information, so if you are interested, you can find out more about how transactions work. So that ends today's lesson. Thank you for watching Educator.com, and look forward to seeing you next time.